The rain-slicked streets of Portland glistened under the streetlights. And I was halfway through a cigarette I didn't even want when Ethan's voice cut through the drizzle. "Jake, I'm in love with you." My laugh was sharp. Automatic. A reflex to the absurdity of an Almy coworker. My friend. Blurting this out in the middle of our smoke break. But the way his eyes locked onto mine, raw and unyielding, stopped me cold. I should have seen it coming. Ethan had been acting strange for weeks, lingering glances during team meetings. Extra coffees left on my desk with my name scrawled in his precise handwriting. The way he'd hover near me at the bar after work, like he was guarding something precious. We were both 25. Both graphic designers at a small firm in downtown Portland, Oregon, grinding through deadlines and late-night pitches. I thought we were just close. The kind of close where you share dumb memes and complain about clients. Apparently, Ethan thought differently. "Love," I echoed, flicking ash into the wet pavement, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Come on, man. You're joking, right?" His face didn't crack. Not even a little. Instead, he stepped closer, the rain catching in his light brown hair, making it stick to his forehead. "No, Jake. I'm serious. I've been serious for months." My stomach twisted. Not because I was repulsed. Ethan was a good guy. Handsome in a quiet way, with a smile that could light up a room, but because I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready for him. So, like an idiot, I laughed again and said, "All right, fine. I'll say yes to your little confession. Happy now?" It was a joke. A deflection. The kind of thing I'd say to diffuse tension with a smirk. Ethan's face lit up like I'd handed him the stars. Before I could backtrack, he grabbed my hand, his grip warm and firm, and whispered, "You mean it?" My brain screamed to clarify, to say it was a prank, but my mouth stayed shut. Something about his hope, so fragile and bright, made me hesitate. That hesitation was my first mistake. The next morning, Ethan was at my desk before I even sat down, holding a coffee and a bagel from my favorite cafe. "Thought you'd need this after last night," he said, his voice soft but brimming with something new confidence. "Maybe. Or possession." I mumbled a thanks, my mind still reeling from the alley. I figured he'd drop it, that he'd realize I was kidding. But by noon, he was texting me about dinner plans. By the end of the week, he was calling me babe in front of our coworkers, who shot me knowing looks I didn't know how to answer. "Ethan, slow down," I said one evening as we left the office, his arm brushing mine too deliberately. "This is a lot." He stopped walking, his hazel eyes searching mine like he was decoding a puzzle. "You said yes, Jake. You said you felt it too." His voice cracked, and guilt hit me like a freight train. I hadn't meant to lead him on, but every time I tried to explain, his face would crumple, and I'd back off. I didn't want to hurt him. Not Ethan, who'd stayed late to help me finish projects, who'd listened to me rant about my family, who'd made me laugh harder than anyone. But the truth was, I wasn't sure what I felt. I'd never dated a guy before. I'd had girlfriends, flings, nothing serious. I thought I was straight, or at least I'd never questioned it. Ethan's confession cracked something open in me, a question I wasn't ready to answer. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to shut it down. Not when he looked at me like I was his whole world. Weeks passed, and Ethan's affection grew relentless. He'd show up at my apartment unannounced with takeout, plan weekend trips I hadn't agreed to, talk about our future like it was set in stone. It was suffocating, but also intoxicating. His certainty made me wonder if I could feel the same. If I could be the person he saw when he looked at me. I started noticing things: how his hands moved when he sketched, how his laugh filled a room, how safe I felt when he was around. Was that love? Or was I just caught in his orbit, too weak to pull away? One night, at a dive bar with our coworkers, Ethan slid into the booth next to me, his thigh pressed against mine. "You're quiet tonight," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I shrugged, sipping my beer, trying to ignore the heat creeping up my neck. Across the table, our coworker Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You two are cute," she said, smirking. "Didn't know Jake swung that way." I froze, my heart pounding. Ethan just grinned, slinging an arm around my shoulders. "He's figuring it out," he said, and I wanted to disappear. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my cramped apartment. Ethan's words echoed in my head. "He's figuring it out." Was I? Or was I just letting this spiral because I didn't know how to stop it without breaking him? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to lose him, not as a friend, not as whatever this was becoming. But I wasn't ready to call it love. Not yet. The weeks blurred into a strange rhythm. Ethan was everywhere, my phone buzzing with his texts, my desk cluttered with his little gifts, my evenings filled with his presence. He'd started inviting me to his place, a small loft across town with exposed brick walls and art supplies scattered everywhere. "I want you to feel at home here," he said one night, handing me a glass of wine as we sat on his couch. His eyes were so earnest, so full of hope, that I couldn't bring myself to tell him I was drowning. I tried to set boundaries. "Ethan, we need to talk," I said one morning at the office, pulling him into an empty meeting room. "This is moving too fast." "I'm not. I don't know if I'm ready for this." His face fell, but he nodded, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his sweater. "Okay, Jake. I'll back off. Just don't shut me out." "All right." I promised I wouldn't, but the guilt gnawed at me. I was leading him on, wasn't I? Even if I didn't mean to. But Ethan didn't back off. Not really. He'd give me space for a day, maybe two. Then he'd be back with a new sketch he'd drawn of us stick figures holding hands. Or worse, a portrait of me he'd spent hours on. "You inspire me," he said, showing me the drawing, his voice trembling with pride. I stared at the paper, at the way he'd captured my eyes, my half-smile, and felt a pang I couldn't name. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It was something deeper, something that scared me. One Saturday, he convinced me to go hiking with him in Forest Park. The trails were muddy from recent rain, and we slipped and laughed our way through the trees. For a moment, it felt like old times, just two friends messing around. No pressure, no expectations. But then Ethan stopped at a clearing, the city skyline faint in the distance, and turned to me. "This is what I want," he said, his voice low. You and me. Like this. Always. Before I could respond, he kissed me. It was my first kiss with a guy, and it hit me like a tidal wave. His lips were soft, urgent, tasting of mint and rain. My mind went blank, my body responding before I could think. Me hands found his waist, pulling him closer. When we broke apart, his eyes were shining, and I realized mine were too. Ethan, I started, but he shook his head, pressing a finger to my lips. Don't say anything. Just let this be enough for now. I didn't know how to tell him it wasn't enough. Or maybe it was too much. My head was a mess, torn between wanting to run and wanting to stay in that moment forever. I wasn't ready to be his boyfriend, but I couldn't deny the spark that kiss had ignited. For the rest of the hike, we walked in silence, our hands brushing occasionally, each touch sending a jolt through me. Back at work, things got weirder. Ethan started acting possessive, glaring at anyone who got too close to me, especially our coworker Mark, who'd always been flirty in a harmless way. One day, Mark leaned over my desk to show me a mock-up, and Ethan practically materialized, his voice sharp. Jake's busy. Mark. Maybe later. Mark raised his hands, backing off, but the tension lingered. Later, Ethan apologized, but his eyes were dark, almost desperate. I can't lose you. Jake. That scared me more than anything. Not because I thought he'd hurt me, but because I could see how deep he was in this, how much he'd built his world around me. I started pulling away, skipping after-work drinks, dodging his calls. But Ethan was relentless. He'd show up at my apartment at midnight, eyes red like he'd been crying, begging me to talk. You said yes. He'd whisper, like it was a contract I'd signed in blood. One night, I snapped. Ethan, I was joking. I didn't mean it like that. The words spilled out before I could stop them, and his face crumpled like I'd punched him. You didn't mean it? He asked, his voice barely audible. I wanted to take it back, to fix it. But the truth was out, and it hung between us like a guillotine. He left without another word, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But the relief was short-lived. The next day, Ethan wasn't at work. Or the day after. When I texted him, he didn't reply. I should have been glad for the space, but all I felt was emptiness. I missed his stupid coffee runs, his laugh, the way he made everything brighter. Had I ruined everything? Was I wrong about what I felt? I didn't know, but I knew I had to find him. I had to make this right, whatever right meant. I drove to Ethan's loft that evening, my heart pounding like a drum. His building was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like it's holding secrets. I knocked, then pounded, but no answer. His neighbor, an older woman with a cat in her arms, poked her head out. He left a couple days ago, she said, frowning. Looked upset. Had a bag with him. Panic clawed at me. Where had he gone? Why hadn't he told anyone? I called Sarah, our coworker, hoping she'd know something. He's been weird since you two got close, she said, her voice laced with concern. Keeps talking about you like you're his soulmate. Jake, what's going on? I didn't know how to explain without sounding like a jerk, so I mumbled something vague and hung up. I spent the next few days scouring social media, texting mutual friends, even driving by his favorite coffee shop. Nothing. On the fourth day, I found a note slipped under my apartment door. Ethan's handwriting. Neat and deliberate. Meet me at the pier. 7 p.m. Please. My stomach flipped. I didn't know if I was ready to face him, but I couldn't leave him hanging. Not after everything. The Portland waterfront was alive with joggers and street musicians when I arrived. Ethan stood at the end of the pier, leaning against the railing, staring out at the Willamette River. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched, his sweater too big for his frame. When he saw me, his face lit up, but there was something fragile in his eyes, like he was bracing for a blow. Jake, he said, stepping toward me. You came. I nodded, shoving my hands in my pockets to keep from fidgeting. I was worried about you. Where have you been? He looked away, his jaw tight. I needed to think. About us. About what you said. His voice broke on the last word, and I felt like the worst person alive. Ethan, I'm sorry. I started, but he held up a hand. Don't. Just listen. I know you didn't mean it when you said yes. I know it was a joke, but it wasn't for me. I've been in love with you for a year. Jake. Every day, every stupid coffee, every late night at the office seat was all for you. His words hit me like bullets, each one heavier than the last. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat was tight, my mind blank. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. I thought if I showed you how much I cared, you'd feel it too. But I pushed too hard, didn't I? I nodded, barely, and he let out a shaky laugh. Yeah. I figured. But I can't stop. Jake. I don't know how. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to run, to end this before it got messy. But another part, the part that remembered his kiss, his laugh, the way he made me feel seen, wanted to stay. Ethan, I don't know what I feel. I admitted, my voice raw. I'm not. I've never done this before. With a guy? With anyone. Really. But I don't want to lose you. His eyes softened, and for a moment, I thought he'd kiss me again. Instead, he took my hand, his fingers warm against mine. Then let's figure it out. Together. No pressure. No expectations. Just us. I wanted to believe it could be that simple. But the weight of his love, his hope, felt like a responsibility I wasn't sure I could carry. We walked along the pier, talking about everything and nothing work. Movies. The way the river reflected the city lights. For the first time in weeks, it felt like we were friends again, not whatever tangled mess we'd become. But as we said goodbye, his hand lingered in mine, and I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next week, Ethan was back at work, but he was different, quieter, more cautious. He didn't call me babe or leave gifts on my desk, but his eyes still followed me, full of unspoken questions. I tried to act normal, but every interaction felt loaded, like we were tiptoeing around a minefield. Our coworkers noticed, whispering behind our backs, and I caught Mark giving me a sympathetic look that made my skin crawl. I didn't need pity. I needed clarity. One night, I invited Ethan over to my place, determined to set things straight. We sat on my couch, a pizza box between us, and I took a deep breath. Ethan, I need to be honest. I care about you. A lot. But I don't know if it's love. Not yet. He nodded, his face unreadable. I can wait, he said simply, and I wanted to scream. Waiting wasn't the answer. Waiting was just another way to keep us stuck. I started seeing a therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Carter who worked out of a cozy office downtown. So, Jake, she said during our first session, her glasses perched on her nose. Why are you here? I spilled everything: the joke, Ethan's confession, the kiss, my confusion. She listened, nodding, then asked, "What are you afraid of?" The question hit me like a punch. I was afraid of hurting Ethan, of losing him, of what it meant if I actually felt something for him. I was afraid of myself. Dr. Carter suggested I take time to explore my feelings, to stop letting Ethan's intensity dictate my pace. Easier said than done. Ethan was trying to give me space, but his presence was still overwhelming. He'd text me late at night. Not pushy. Just, there. Saw this and thought of you. He'd write, attaching a photo of a sunset or a dumb meme. Each message chipped away at my resolve, making me question whether I was running from him or from myself. One weekend, I went to a queer community event in Portland, something I'd never have done before Ethan. It was a small pride festival, colorful flags everywhere, people laughing and dancing. I went alone, hoping to find answers in the crowd. A guy named Leo, maybe 30, struck up a conversation at a food truck. He was openly gay, confident, and easy to talk to. When I told him about Ethan, he raised an eyebrow. Sounds like you're in deep. Man, ever thought about what you want? Not just what he wants. I didn't have an answer. Leo's words stuck with me. What did I want? I'd spent so much time reacting to Ethan's feelings that I hadn't stopped to consider my own. I liked Ethan's kindness, his passion, the way he made me feel alive. But was that enough? Was I ready to be with a man, to face the world as part of a couple like that? The thought made my chest tight, but it also sparked something: curiosity. Maybe. Or hope. Back at work, Ethan seemed to sense a shift in me. He was less intense, more patient, but I could tell it was killing him to hold back. One day, during a lunch break, he sat across from me at a cafe and said, "I'm trying. Jake, I don't want to scare you off, but I need to know if there's a chance." His vulnerability was like a knife, cutting through my defenses. I reached across the table, touching his hand briefly. "There's a chance," I said, and his smile was worth every sleepless night. We started spending time together again, but slower this time. Coffee dates, movie nights, walks through the city. I let myself feel the moments: the brush of his shoulder, the warmth of his laugh without overthinking them. It was terrifying, but also freeing. For the first time, I wasn't just going along with Ethan's feelings. I was choosing to be there. One night, we ended up at a rooftop bar, the city sprawling below us. Ethan leaned against the railing, his eyes reflecting the neon lights. "You're different lately," he said, not looking at me. "Less scared." I laughed, sipping my drink. "I'm still scared. Just trying to figure out what it means." He turned to me, his expression soft. "That's enough for me. For now." But the peace didn't last. A week later, I got a call from Sarah. Her voice panicked. "Jake, it's Ethan. He's in the hospital." My heart stopped. She explained he'd been in a minor car accident. Someone ran a red light, clipped his car. He was okay, just shaken. But I was already grabbing my keys, my mind racing. All I could think was, I can't lose him. At the hospital, Ethan was sitting up in bed, a bruise on his cheek, his arm in a sling. When he saw me, he tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Guess I'm a mess." "Huh," he said, his voice hoarse. I sat beside him, my hand shaking. "You scared the hell out of me," I said, and before I could stop myself, I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't like the first kiss, all heat and confusion. This was soft, desperate, a promise I didn't fully understand but meant with every fiber of my being. When I pulled back, Ethan's eyes were wet. "Does this mean you're in?" he whispered. I didn't answer, just held his hand, my heart pounding. For the first time, I wasn't running. Ethan's recovery was slow but steady. I visited him every day, bringing takeout or books to keep him occupied. We talked about everything: our childhoods, our dreams, the little things that made us who we were. I learned he'd grown up in a small town in Idaho, where being gay wasn't something you shouted about. "I knew I liked guys when I was 12, he told me one night, propped up on pillows in his hospital bed. But I didn't tell anyone until college. Even then, it was hard. His honesty made me ache, made me want to protect him, even as I grappled with my own feelings. When he was discharged, I drove him home, helping him carry his things up to his loft. "You don't have to do this," he said, watching me unpack groceries. "I'm not your responsibility." I stopped, meeting his gaze. "I want to be here, Ethan." "Okay." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the fear that I'd bolt again. I didn't. Not that time. We settled into a new routine, spending evenings at his place, cooking dinner, watching bad reality TV. It felt domestic, almost too easy, and I started to wonder if this was what love looked like. Not the grand gestures or burning passion, but the quiet moments. The way he'd hum while chopping vegetables. The way he'd lean into me on the couch. But doubts crept in. What if I was just playing a role, trying to be what Ethan needed? What if I wasn't enough for him? Dr. Carter pushed me to confront these questions. "You're allowed to be unsure," she said during one session. "But you're not allowed to hide from yourself." So I tried. I journaled. I talked to Leo from the Pride Festival. I even called my older sister. Mia, who lived in Seattle. You sound like you're falling for him, she said, her voice teasing but kind. Is that so bad? I didn't know how to answer. One night, Ethan and I went to a local art gallery, one of his favorite spots. His arm was still in a sling, but he was glowing, pointing out paintings and telling me their stories. This one's about longing, he said, stopping in front of a canvas streaked with blues and grays. The artist loved someone who didn't love them back. His voice was soft, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the painting. I took his hand, squeezing it. I'm trying. Ethan, I whispered. I really am. He turned to me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. That's all I've ever wanted. We stood there, surrounded by art and silence, and I felt something shift. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was closure promised to keep trying, to keep showing up. But life doesn't let you stay in those moments. A week later, Ethan got a job offer from a big design firm in San Francisco. It was his dream job, the kind of opportunity he'd talked about since we met. They want me to start next month, he said, showing me the email at a coffee shop. His voice was excited, but his eyes were searching, waiting for my reaction. I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. That's amazing, I said, forcing a smile. You have to take it. He frowned, leaning forward. I don't want to go if it means losing you. The words hung in the air, heavy with expectation. I wanted to tell him to stay, to choose me, but I couldn't. Not when I wasn't sure what I was offering. Ethan, you can't pass this up, I said, my voice tight. It's your dream. He looked away, his jaw clenched, and I knew I'd hurt him again. The next few days were tense. Ethan was distant, burying himself in work, while I wrestled with what his leaving meant. I cared about him more than I'd admitted to myself, but was it enough to ask him to stay? Or to follow him? The idea of moving to San Francisco, of committing to this, terrified me. But the thought of him gone was worse. I went back to the pier where we'd talked weeks ago, hoping the river would give me answers. It didn't. All I could think about was Ethan's face. The way he'd looked at me in the hospital. The way he believed in us even when I didn't. I realized I wasn't just afraid of losing him. I was afraid of losing the chance to find out what we could be. I decided to tell Ethan the truth, all of it. No more half answers. No more hiding. I invited him to my apartment, my hands shaking as I set out 2 beers on the coffee table. When he arrived, he looked tired, his eyes shadowed with worry. What's this about, Jake? He asked, sitting across from me. I took a deep breath and let it out. Ethan, I've been a mess. I started, my voice unsteady. When I said yes that night, it was a joke. Yeah, but it's not anymore. I don't know if I'm in love with you, but I feel something. Something big. And it scares the hell out of me because I've never felt this way about anyone, let alone a guy. His eyes widened, but he stayed silent, letting me continue. I don't want you to go to San Francisco, but I don't want to hold you back either. I need you to know I'm trying to figure this out, and I want you in my life while I do. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he crossed the room, kneeling in front of me, his hands on my knees. "Jake," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's more than I ever hoped for." He leaned up, kissing me softly. And this time, I didn't pull away. I kissed him back, letting myself feel the warmth, the connection, the possibility. We spent the rest of the night talking, really talking, about what we wanted, what we were afraid of. Ethan admitted he'd been too scared of pushing me away, of loving too much. "I've never felt like this before," he said, his head resting on my shoulder. "It's like you're under my skin, and I can't shake you." I laughed, the sound shaky but real. "Yeah, well, you're pretty hard to shake too." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan decided to take the job in San Francisco, but he asked me to visit, to see if we could make it work long distance. I agreed, partly because I wanted to, partly because I owed it to both of us to try. We spent every moment we could together before he left hiking, watching movies, stealing kisses in the office break room when no one was looking. It felt like we were building something real. But reality crept in. Long distance was harder than I expected. Ethan's new job kept him busy, and our calls dwindled from daily to weekly. I missed him, more than I thought possible, but I also felt the weight of my own uncertainty. Was I ready for this? Could I be the partner he deserved? Dr. Carter pushed me to be honest with myself. "Love isn't just a feeling," she said. "It's a choice. Are you choosing Ethan?" I didn't know, but I knew I had to see him. I booked a flight to San Francisco, my heart in my throat the entire way. When I landed, Ethan was waiting at the airport, his smile brighter than the California sun. He hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. And for a moment, everything felt right. San Francisco was a different world, vibrant, chaotic, full of life. Ethan showed me his new apartment, his favorite coffee shop, the Golden Gate Bridge at sunset. We walked hand in hand, and for the first time, I didn't care who saw us. I felt free, like I was finally stepping into my own skin. That night, in his tiny apartment, we made love for the first time. It was clumsy, intense, and perfect. And when I woke up with him beside me, I knew I was falling. But love doesn't solve everything. Ethan's life in San Francisco was full new friends, new projects, a new rhythm. I felt like a visitor, not a partner. When I brought it up, he frowned, pulling me close. "We can make this work, Jake. I'll come back to Portland if you want." But I couldn't ask that of him, not when he was thriving. On my last night there, we sat on his balcony, the city lights sprawling below us. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. "We keep trying," he said. "We choose each other, every day, until it's not a choice anymore." His words were a lifeline, but they also scared me. Choosing him meant choosing myself, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Back in Portland, the distance felt like a chasm. Ethan and I texted, called, even sent letters as filled with sketches. Mine with bad jokes, but it wasn't the same. I threw myself into work, trying to fill the void. But every deadline, every meeting, reminded me of him. Sarah noticed, pulling me aside one day. "You're miserable without him. Jake, why don't you just go?" I wanted to, but fear held me back. What if I moved to San Francisco and it didn't work? What if I wasn't enough? I started exploring my identity more, joining a local LGBTQ plus support group. The people there were kind, open, sharing stories that echoed my confusion, fear, hope. One guy, Alex, told me about coming out later in life, how it felt like waking up. "You don't have to have all the answers," he said. "Just keep asking the questions." It helped, but it didn't erase the ache of missing Ethan. One night, during a video call, Ethan looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed. "This is harder than I thought," he admitted. "I miss you so much it hurts." My heart twisted. "I miss you too," I said, and for the first time, I meant it without reservation. We talked about me moving to San Francisco, about what it would mean. "I don't want to pressure you," he said, but I could hear the hope in his voice. I spent the next week thinking, really thinking, about what I wanted. I loved Ethan, I was sure of it now, not because of his intensity, but because of the quiet moments, the way he made me want to be better. But love wasn't enough if I wasn't ready to live it fully. I called Mia, spilling everything. "You're scared because it's real," she said. "That's how you know it matters." I decided to visit Ethan again, this time with a plan. I wanted to try living in San Francisco, not just for him, but for me to see who I could be in a place where I wasn't hiding. When I told him, he cried, laughing through his tears. "You're serious?" he asked, and I nodded, my own eyes stinging. "I'm choosing you," I said, and it felt like the truest thing I'd ever said. The move wasn't easy. I found a job at a small design studio, a step down from my Portland gig, but it was a start. My apartment was tiny, barely big enough for a bed, but Ethan was there every step of the way, helping me unpack, showing me the city. We fought sometimes about money, about time, about the little things that pile up when you're building a life together. But we always came back to each other. One night, we went to a queer bar in the Castro, dancing under neon lights. Ethan pulled me close, his hands on my waist, and whispered, "I'm so glad you're here." I kissed him, not caring who saw, and realized I wasn't afraid anymore. I was home not just in San Francisco, but with him. But life loves a twist. A month later, I got a call from my dad, who I hadn't spoken to in years. He was sick, needed help back in Portland. "I don't expect you to come," he said, his voice gruff, "but I'd like to see you." It was the first time he'd reached out since I'd left home at 18, and it threw me. Ethan saw the conflict in my eyes. "Go," he said, squeezing my hand. "I'll be here when you get back." I flew to Portland, unsure what I'd find. My dad was frilier than I remembered, his tough exterior softened by illness. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. I told him about Ethan, about my life, bracing for judgment. But he just nodded, his eyes tired but kind. Sounds like you found something worth keeping, he said. I cried. Not just for him, but for the years we'd lost. For the person I was becoming. I stayed in Portland for 2 weeks, helping my dad with doctor's appointments and sorting through years of unspoken baggage. It wasn't easy, but it was healing. When I told him I was going back to San Francisco, to Ethan, he hugged me, a rare, awkward gesture that meant everything. Don't let him go, he said, and I promised I wouldn't. Back in San Francisco, Ethan was waiting at the airport, his smile brighter than ever. We didn't talk much on the drive to his apartment, just held hands, the silence comfortable. That night, we lay in bed, his head on my chest, and I realized I wasn't just in love with him. I was choosing him. Every day, just like he'd said. Our life together wasn't perfect. We argued about dishes, about whose turn it was to pick dinner, about the future. But we also laughed, dreamed, built a world together. I came out to my coworkers, my friends, my family, each step a little easier because Ethan was by my side. I wasn't just Jake anymore, the guy who'd said yes as a joke. I was Jake, the guy who'd fallen in love, who'd faced his fears and found something worth fighting for. One evening, we went back to the Golden Gate Bridge, where we'd walked on my first visit. The sunset was fire red, the air cool against our skin. Ethan pulled out a small box, his hands shaking. I'm not asking for forever, he said, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring. I'm asking for right now. Will you choose me, Jake? My heart swelled, and I laughed, tears in my eyes. Yeah, I said, pulling him close. I say yes. This time, it wasn't a joke. It was a promise, one we'd keep building, day by day. We weren't perfect, but we were real, and that was enough. As we stood there, the city glowing around us, I knew we'd face whatever came next together. The journey hadn't been easy. It started with a laugh, a moment of carelessness that spiraled into something life-changing. Ethan's love had been relentless, sometimes overwhelming, but it had also shown me who I could be. I'd been afraid of him, of myself, of the world, but love, real love, doesn't let you hide. It pulls you forward, demands you show up, and I was ready. We walked back to our apartment, hand in hand, the ring cool against my finger. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I wasn't running from it. I'd said yes to Ethan, to us, and I meant it. And as the city lights flickered around us, I knew we'd keep saying yes. Every day, for as long as we had.